are many companies who employ recruiters right now who are simply not recruiting because there aren't jobs to be working on. So now is actually a phenomenal time to begin that relationship development process with your respective recruiter.
So this is my special guest tonight, Boris Epstein. Boris, does BINC expand anything? BINC, is it an acronym, or is it Boris Inc., or what's the story?
It has been accused of standing for Boris Inc. It has also been accused of standing for Boris is not cool, best in class, many acronyms that I think has been accused of standing for.
Got it. But it is not, in fact, anything, or do you admit to any of them?
I do admit to it being Boris Inc.
Boris Inc. All right. So Boris runs Boris Inc., which is even better. You should just expand it to that. But Bink Search is a professional placement firm, or in the vernacular, Boris is a headhunter, which is not the same as a cannibal. But Boris will be our guest here tonight. He and I have known each other at least 10 years. And you guys have heard me, frankly, bloviate just a tiny bit about the fact that over the course of my career, I've done about 2,500 interviews, which is a solid number for a manager, for a line manager. Boris's firm, which employs about 100 people, and let me see actually real quick if I can switch views because I have this up. Where'd it go? 1 second. We're gonna play show and tell here real quick. Where on your website is your team? There it is. Let's see if I switch views and I go here. Nope, that's me alone. We'll finish the intro in a sec. We'll do the drink. So this is Boris's team. And the point is, this is a big firm. Like, this is a lot of people processing resumes, working with companies to get jobs posted. So his firm does as many interviews, talks to as many people live to find them jobs in a week as I have in my life. So that's pretty awesome. So tonight we're going to talk to Boris about, hey, wherever you are in your career, how do you work with firms like his to find a job? And so what we're going to do is he's going to talk a little bit about it. I'm going to let him talk. And then after we do that, we'll do Q&A like always. So if you've ever wanted to ask a true expert on job search, way better than me, this is your one and only chance to start using our extension and cranking those questions in and voting on them, because Boris is way more skilled at this than I am. And then the last thing we'll do is I will have him do some resume review. So if I get the chance to edit and anonymize more resumes for him, I will. But otherwise, I have his favorite resume and an example of one he doesn't like. And then I have some of your resumes from the community. And we'll put all those resumes on screen. We'll do them one at a time, but you'll be able to hear from someone who has a ton more experience than me, which just might mean that I'll have to learn something and revise the advice I'm always giving you. We'll try something right now. We'll throw it out there, Boris, because I stream with another guy sometimes, a guy named Devin, and he and I have a running debate about whether or not you should have a headshot or a picture on a resume ever. Thoughts?
I'm gonna go with a strong no on that one.
Really? Okay. So that's where I began. He talked me into it. Say more about why. I love to start with a good controversy.
I'll default to the standard resume format and what a recruiter looks for,
Okay.
and the picture being not that. And so the picture ends up adding an element that makes the recruiter think there's more for an unclear reason, and it just pops them out of whatever their natural flow would be. And so it's possible that in different cultures or in different parts of the world, it's a little bit more custom. And in that case, not having a picture would be would be the standout, but in the culture of at least the market that we serve, pictures are not common.
Sweet. All right. Got it. Appreciate that. So
Which side of it were you on, the picture side or the non-picture side?
I started off on the no picture side,
Okay.
and then we reviewed a lot of resumes, and I realized that at least as a hiring manager, the picture was eye catching. Like it differentiated the resume and gave a little bit of uniqueness to it. Um, and if it was small and tasteful and professional, whether it was in a suit or just not in rags, it gave me more of a sense of a human on the other side of the page. Now, it was pointed out that this could be a negative, right? It could be a negative um, to have. It could be bad if essentially your reviewer is biased. In other words, if it's easy to say white guys should throw their photo on it comparatively, and it might be harder if you're a minority of any type,
Right.
or older, or in any way don't meet whatever the person's stereotype might be of their ideal employee. So definitely, I'm glad, but I totally believe that for professionals who are scanning resumes all day, all the time, it amounts to just, why did you distract me? So a little bit different use case. All right, so the one last thing I have to do, we have a number of rituals on this channel, and one of them is the drink of the day. And so for everyone who's wondering, today it's a blueberry lemon drop martini on my end. And so while Boris talks, I will indulge. And Boris, what would you say about how to work with a firm like yours and all the people who need to find jobs in now what looks like a recession? What is your top advice?
Yeah, happy to share, and I'll first just share that I didn't get the tip that there was an opportunity to bring a drink of the day.
Mm.
I would have definitely indulged.
I am so sorry.
No,
That
no,
is bad hosting on my part. I can cover for you later.
thank you. You enjoy that martini double for me then.
All right.
Yeah, just little bit about myself. So I got into recruiting by complete accident 18 years ago. Just so happened to have been right after the first .com bust, or right before September 11th. So I didn't really know any different. I had heard that a lot of recruiters had just left the business. Rather than running from the business, I saw it as a good thing, less competition, and so just went right into it. And so cut my teeth on what I think the industry considered to be tough times, and so fairly comfortable in what the industry right now is looking at as a generally difficult time to be a recruiter or engaging in job search. We've always recruited for the technology industry. I'll share a little bit about just how the recruiting industry works, so that as your audience is navigating the world of job search or navigating the world of recruiters, they have some way to frame their part. So the recruiting industry primarily breaks down into two different types of recruiters. There's one, what you'd call an in-house recruiter. An in-house recruiter is a recruiter who is employed by a company, and their sole job is to help that company make hires. So Ethan, you work for Amazon. Amazon employs a large number of in-house recruiters, and so those recruiters are solely focused on helping Amazon hire the people that they respectively need. Amazon in-house recruiters are not interested in helping Google hire people or Facebook hire people. They're only interested in Amazon. Then the second type of recruiter that exists is what's called an agency recruiter or an external recruiter. An external recruiter typically focuses on some part of the job marketplace. They may focus on a certain person that they place. You have external recruiters that focus on placing accountants. You have external recruiters that focus on placing designers. You might have an external recruiter who focuses on placing designers in Seattle with mid-sized companies. And so any external recruiter will likely focus on something or have something that differentiates them from any other external recruiter. One thing that's worth noting about recruiters in general is that every recruiter that you meet is incentivized primarily by the companies that they serve. Their primary motivation is to help companies make hires. At some point, it used to be that they were incentivized by candidates. There was a point in life, I think it was maybe in the 60s or 70s, recruiting history is right, where recruiters were paid by candidates. A candidate would pay a recruiter money in order to help them find a job. That switched at one point, and now the predominant incentive for a recruiter is for a company to pay them. If you follow the incentives, that then means that recruiters are primarily motivated not by helping candidates find a job, but by primarily helping a company fill a job. Um, it's possible that by it's possible it's possible that by helping a company fill a job, they will in fact help candidates. And our firm works with a number of candidates and helping them find jobs. But our sole focus and a recruiter's sole focus is to help a company fill a job. That's something that's worth noting from a job seekers lens. Whenever they are in fact engaging with a recruiter, while a recruiter uh, may seem to have an interest in their career growth and their career development and whatever is best for them, that's primarily because it serves their core motivation, which is to help a company fill a job or deliver on some form of a hire. Um, the way our company, the way Bink fits into the ecosystem, we're kind of a hybrid of what I just described as an in-house recruiter and an external recruiter. Companies like Amazon, or we work with Stripe and DoorDash and Roblox and Instacart, pretty much many of the technology companies that people who in today's day and age are relying on for whatever service it is that they're using. Um, we assign our recruiters, our full-time employees, that team that Ethan showed. We assign our recruiters to work under the brand of those companies to help them build out some department or some team or fill some roles with those companies. So our company acts like an external firm in the sense that we enlist in job hunting best practices and candidate search best practices, but we operate under the brand of our clients. So we're kind of a hybrid of both. Thought I'd share just some general tips on one, finding a recruiter, because if you're a professional, then it's in your interest to identify and establish and develop relationships with recruiters, because recruiters can provide a wealth of knowledge and insight that can help you when you're engaging in a job search, and can also help you a ton when you're looking for market insight to help navigate perhaps your internal career growth and development as well. So it behooves you to find the recruiters that quote unquote play in your space, so that you can engage with them when you need, and be there for them when circumstances share as well. So the first thing that you want to do is, um, uh, if you're a professional, you want to do a search, or begin to search around for recruiters that seem to be recruiting for similar types of people like yourself. It could be agency recruiters, it could be in-house recruiters, but you want to identify those recruiters that seem to be focusing on people like you. It could be recruiters who work for a company that's in your space. If you work for Amazon, it's worth it to get to know recruiters that work for Facebook, or recruiters that work for Google, companies that are in a peer ecosystem to what you do. If you're a designer, it might be worth it to get to know a recruiter who works for a design agency, as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get to know that recruiter, it's worth it to introduce yourself. You could do that via LinkedIn. You could do that via sending an email. You could ask to connect with them on LinkedIn. Because recruiters are very incentivized to fill jobs, if you did your homework right and you happen to fit that demographic that they're trying to fill, they'll naturally engage with you. If they don't engage with you, don't take it personally. It might be that you don't fit the exact demographic that they're working on, or maybe they just don't have something for you right now. It's worth it to continue to engage with them. You could follow them on LinkedIn. You could like their posts. All recruiters are humans. They generally like that and will respond to that. And like any relationship that you try to build, after a few follow-ups, after a few ways of showing some value their way, you're likely to start to get some likely to get some response. Of course, again, if they have something for you in the form of a fitting job opportunity, it won't matter to them whether or not they have a relationship with you. They'll want to engage with you anyways,
Hmm.
and they will. And I promise you, that. But for those times where they may not have something for you, or you want to just engage, and which I will say right now is an exceptional time to engage with a recruiter. It might not be that they have an exact job for you right now. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. That's 100% circumstantial. But they very likely have time on their hands. Recruiters, because many companies are slowing down in their hiring or have job pauses, there are many companies who employ recruiters right now who are simply not recruiting because there aren't jobs to be working on. So now is actually a phenomenal time to begin that relationship development process with your respective recruiter. If your goal is to specifically land a job, you want to think from the perspective of the recruiter, because the recruiter is trying to fill a job. You want to position yourself as, fillable, or as placeable, so a recruiter would say, as you possibly can. Which, a good way to do that is, find the jobs the recruiter is working on, read the job descriptions the recruiter is working on, review some of the LinkedIn profiles of the people that are in that job today, and position yourself to be as like those as you can be. That'll give you a good shot at getting the recruiter's attention. With that, recruiters are well skilled at reviewing a resume. So no matter what you say in trying to develop a relationship, they will review your resume, and they'll do it pretty quickly. A recruiters can review a resume in about 30 seconds, and with that, they'll likely have a good sense of whether there's a fit or not. If they have the time, if they're feeling incentivized or motivated, they will respond. And there are some recruiters who, like to, help people and want to be there for people, and they'll engage. And there are other recruiters that they'll help people as the byproduct of what they're trying to do, which is help their clients hire the best people possible. And in that case, they'll likely more engage when they have something for you. Don't take it personally if they don't respond.
We can't take it personally. That doesn't sound fair, actually. It sounds like we should totally be able to take it personally somehow. But I appreciate that. You ran by some things. I don't know if I'm interrupting you, but you said so much there. And I was triggered on all these questions I wanted to ask you. And some of them will come out from the audience as well. The first thing I tell the audience is it never makes, you always want to build your network before you need it. Like the last time you want to be building a network or starting a network is when you're out of a job. And so what I heard from you is a great time to get to know a recruiter is before kind of it's too late, or build a little bit of that relationship if you can ahead of time. Is that fair advice? Is that good advice?
Yeah, it's absolutely fair. Right
Okay.
now, recruiters, at least on the agency side, are primarily engaged in relationship development because companies are not hiring as much, and it's not as tasteful today to be trying to sell something, or trying to prioritize a transaction, because now's not the greatest time for that. And so relationship development is very much top of mind for a lot of people in the world. And so it's an incredible time as a job seeker to position yourself within that relationship development kind of mindset and vernacular, and find the space and time to engage and get to know a recruiter.
Okay. And I see here in chat, people are asking, as well as in our Q&A our Q&A tool that we'll get to in a minute. They're asking, how do I know what a recruiting firm specializes in? For example, your firm, but then obviously we can talk a bit about Pinnacle Society, which I can explain next. How does someone know who are the recruiters in their space or in their industry? What's the
Good,
easiest way to find that out?
yeah, good question. So if you go to, for example, if you go to our website, if you found me somewhere, you go to our website, you'll see from our website that we focus on the technology industry. You'll click on our portfolio or companies that we work with. and you'll see the types of companies that we work with, and so you'll be able to pretty quickly get a sense of what our space is. You mentioned the Pinnacle side, Ethan, and it's pretty much a membership of 75 of the top agency or external recruiters in the country, and we have folks that specialize in all sorts of sectors and parts of the economy. We have someone that specializes just in the toy industry. We have someone in Atlanta who specializes just in placing executive assistants. We have a few folks in Houston that work in the oil and gas space. And so a great way to find a recruiter is do a search for open jobs that are similar to what it is that you're looking for. And you'll likely find recruiters that are posting for those openings. You could then check out that recruiter's LinkedIn profile. You could then check out the firm that recruiter works for, and you'll likely be able to get a sense of what they respectively focus on.
Okay, so I switched away for a minute and just showed people your portfolio of companies that you work with. And it's obviously a kind of a who's who of Silicon Valley, everyone from Blue Bottle Coffee to Tesla to Epic Games. A lot of great names in there, Evernote, Groupon. Wonderful set. And yeah, for context, everybody, 10 days or so ago, I had accepted an invite from Boris to go speak to the Pinnacle Society, which is a meta group, essentially, an industry group of firms like Boris's firm, like Bink Search. And it was really interesting because you had these recruiters who were hyper niche. They only place insurance agents. They only place executive assistants. They only place, and these are the best people to connect with. If you can find and make a relationship with a recruiter that only does what you do, they're going to know how to evaluate you. They're going to care about your resume. And without picking on anybody, I may not be able to resist that. There are a few giant job firms that are, Boris doesn't have to say this. It wouldn't be nice for him to say it, but I will say they're kind of the bottom feeders that are what are called body slammers. And they are the sort of folks that are interested in placing large numbers of semi-skilled labor into giant needs very quickly. And they're often large nationwide firms. And those, you're not going to get much personal care, I don't think, from one of those without being mean to them. Since I've said all the bad things, Boris, is there anything you would add about sort of the large national firms that might help people navigate that space or know who they're dealing with?
Yeah, I'll add to the context, and
Yeah.
context is something that's worth having in mind whenever you're engaging with a recruiter. Some of those very niche recruiters that you mentioned likely are working on a smaller number of openings at any given time.
Yep.
They're likely then also working with a smaller number of active candidates at any given time, which means they're able to offer a lot more personal attention and care to each of those individuals. Also, the more senior the roles that the recruiter's working on, the more TLC they'll likely be able to offer just by sheer numbers of roles and people they're working with. Those large national firms you described that are working on the more junior level roles, just by sheer volume, they're likely working on a larger number of positions at any given time with a shorter interview process cycle and with a larger number of active candidates they have to navigate at any given time. So you can imagine the mind share of a recruiter you'll be able to get who's, take two recruiters, one that's working on 100 open jobs at any given time, managing 150 candidates at any given time versus one who's working on 5 open roles at any given time with 12 candidates to manage. You're going to get a very different level of TLC, and both those recruiters could be equally great people. Take nothing away from them as individuals, but having the empathy for what their world realistically looks like. Like Amazon just recently hired, was it 100,000 extra warehouse workers?
Yes.
But I could imagine the news.
And we use
out.
firms to do that, right?
Yeah.
We use firms to help with that for sure.
Yep. And so the space between when they announced the wanting to hire those people and the actual hiring them, they did it very fast, which means that they were able to process those people in a really short amount of time. They probably didn't extend a lot of TLC to their job candidates or even to their hiring leaders. It was primarily a processing game at that point.
Yeah. I don't represent Amazon when I talk here, and I sort of have to be careful to disclaim that my views are my own, which I always do.
Yep.
But I can say when we're hiring in the warehouse, we're focused on basic ability to show up for work and perform some tasks reliably. And it's that's what we're after, right? And then as you move up, it can be a lot more. But coming in the door, it's can you read a panel? Can you pull things off a shelf or put things on a shelf and do so in a systematic, reliable manner? So the hiring
Right.
there, I'm sure it doesn't look like an interview. It looks like more like what we would call a job application.
Right. And speaking to the person in the job search. So we'll shift to different company. Let's say like company like CBS or any company right now that's on the front lines of the COVID-19 crisis. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of very high volume hiring. The more that the job applicant can speak to the needs of the recruiter or the needs of the job, the more they'll be able to offer value to that recruiter, and then therefore receive value in return in the form of being considered for that job and ultimately get that job.
So I've realized I have a personal question for you, and then we'll jump into the ones that people have asked and voted on that we keep in our extension on Twitch, which is a little upvote, downvote extension. So for the viewers here, if you want to upvote or downvote things to have Boris answer or me to comment on, and I see you've given him a couple of our hard classics, which is great. But the question I have, Boris, is candidly, your business is about filling roles. But as a secondary piece of that, that often means enticing people at one company to consider an opportunity at another. And I'm often asked about the benefits and drawbacks of so-called job hopping. Um, and for example, yesterday I celebrated my 15th consecutive. I joined Amazon 15 years ago yesterday. Um, and I never expected to be there for 15 years. That was a surprise to me. So the question at the end of this context setting is, I showed you have 100 employees. Um, and at one level, you're in the business of helping people job hop. But as the owner and co-founder, you're also in the business of retaining people. Advising people here who are trying to be successful in their careers, what would you say about when you should stay and when you should go? Like how, because obviously you don't want your employees to respond to every possible job inquiry. That would devastate your own firm.
Right.
But you're in the business of providing opportunity to people. So you're like the right person to comment because you're on both sides of the line. What's the song, right? Should I stay or should I go?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's real because on the one hand, we're in the business of recruiting and we're in the business of helping people change jobs,
Yep.
and
Which is
primarily
often great.
and we're primarily engaging with people who may not necessarily be thinking about changing jobs, and it's but for our engagement with them, they may be happily they may stay happily employed at their employer.
Yep.
Um, Respecting the status quo of our industry, which means the question of tenure and what's tenured enough, has changed. So
Of
when I first
course.
started recruiting, it used to be a little longer. It used to be 3 to 5 years a good amount of time to stay with the company. And now, at least in our market, and it's possible that other markets are completely different. In our market, the technology firms, I think average tenure is closer to the 1.5 year time frame. And so it's a lot more common, or it fits the status quo to be okay to change jobs after a shorter period of time. And so from our recruiters' perspective, when they look at a resume, job hopping or whatever is considered job hopping is less taboo or is less of an issue in considering that candidate
Yep.
as it used to be, because the industry is moving so much faster. There are so many more great reasons for a candidate to consider new employment outside of whatever it is that's taboo about job hopping. It's not just that the candidate is disloyal
Oh, of course.
or is whatever it is that may kind of fit that taboo that they're changing jobs. Many companies are affected in different ways all the time, and for many reasons. Um, uh, 1.5 years is considered common enough or long enough of a tenure where it's okay to change jobs. Flip that to my responsibility as an employer and a company's responsibility as an employer. If retention is a value, which for many companies it is, but not for every company it is. So for our company, the longer we're able to retain, the more value we're able to provide and then receive from the individual in the form of career growth and development and vice versa. And so we put a lot of energy into retention, and many companies do as well. And so the better that a company could retain someone, the harder it will be to recruit that person out. And so the less energy that a company puts into retention, the easier it will be for a recruiter or another company to recruit them out.
Okay. So, thank you. That was an excellent overview. If I bring it down to an individual, let's say I have a job and I'm not looking to leave, but also someone presents me with another job that might be pretty attractive. How should I make that decision? How should I think about that decision? Like, because you want people to stay at your firm, you also, and I, by the way, if you watch some of my shows over time, I'm telling people if they have a bad boss, for example, get out. So you won't find me, even though I'm a manager and I should be theoretically very much on the retention side. I'm often telling people, make a change. Like if you're in the wrong environment, make a change. But what would you say about when, kind of the hardest question I should give you is, when should someone politely decline an inquiry from, say, you and your team? Like, what would be the things that would indicate it's your opportunity may be good, but I should still stay? And
Yeah.
I'm just asking that because I'm curious. You're like the perfect person, because if you say someone should stay, it's true.
Right. I'd say, and it's a good question, and the answer is that it's really different for everybody. I'll say for
Yep.
our company, the things that we hear for our team is they join because of the people, they join because of the culture, they join because of the career growth, they join because of the companies that they get to work with. When any of those items are deteriorated, if the people that they're working with is deteriorated, if their career growth is deteriorated, if the companies that they get to work with is deteriorated in any way, that then likely compels them to consider something new. When a recruiter engages with them and says, "Hey, we have this other great opportunity," if that value prop that compelled them to join is strong, the people stay strong, the career growth stays strong, the companies they work with stay strong, they'll likely decline, or maybe they'll engage them for just industry insights, but they'll likely not leave the company. So I see an employer in the perpetual business of recruiting. It's their job to recruit people to join for whatever their value proposition, and then it's the employer's job to retain people if they want them to stay. And it's the candidate's job, it's the person's job to decide what their what's important for their future.
Mm-hmm.
It could be some of the things that I mentioned, or it could be commute to work, which right now is remote work. It could be even the openness to remote work. It could be dozens of different things. And to the
Yep.
extent their current employer offers that, great, they should stay. To the extent their another employer offers better than that, great, they should go consider that.
Yep. I actually, thank you. I think you gave a better summary than I often do. You join a company for a set of reasons: career growth, possibly compensation, the people you'll work with, the things you'll work on. If those have held steady or improved, you probably are well served to think about staying at that role. And if they haven't, if they've worsened in some remarkable way, a phone call can be a tremendous opportunity. Um, and for those who don't know, Boris talked about this when I was visiting sort of his team at Pinnacle, his society. Boris and I met when he was recruiting me to take another role. I didn't end up accepting that role. Um, and but we developed a relationship in that's now lasted over a decade. So we both got something out of it. Um, and yeah, so and I got a really he had an unfair problem. I got promoted right as I was in the process and got ladled with a heap and helping of money that I wasn't actually looking for. It was like stunning. So that was good timing. On
And it happens, and that's awesome. And
Yeah,
connecting to the job seeker, you were the candidate,
yep.
and so there was an investment, there was an opportunity to invest in that relationship and continue to develop. And it turned, even though there wasn't a transaction that
Yeah.
consummated, it was incredible exchange of value and experience over the 10-year period of time.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. So we have some questions here. Our moderator will pop up the first one, but I'll go ahead and read it to you. In the most general sense possible, how can I stand out in a job pool against hundreds of other applicants? So this is a common question we get, which is, oh boy, there's so many people. How do I distinguish myself? Which actually, we talked early in this stream about the photo on the resume, which you weren't a fan of, but it does lead. Let's assume I have a decent form resume. How do I stand out?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Some of the ways that I've seen candidates stand out in the past is so. It's most common for a candidate to submit a resume. It's less common for a candidate to submit a, you know, not necessarily a cover letter. Cover letters aren't necessarily in style, but maybe a cover email or introductory email that's supplemented by a resume. It's least common for that email to be custom written.
Hmm.
9 times out of 10, that email is copy paste, and a recruiter could tell in 3 seconds whether it's copy and paste. And so, taking the moment to draft a custom email in whatever way is personalized to you or to that recruiter or to that job will add value. Two, if you did an interview and you want to stand out, then sending a custom follow-up note. Again, most people don't send follow-up notes. Those that do send follow-up notes, most are generic. Writing something custom is worthwhile. And then the third thing, a third way to stand out is um, engage with the recruiter or with the company or interviewer in some way that's seems to be distinguished from what every other candidate is doing. It may be commenting on the person's LinkedIn. It may be liking their LinkedIn. It may be um, noticing something that the company or the recruiter put out into the world that may warrant a comment or some follow up. But somehow find a way to develop a relationship with the company or the individuals in a way that is memorable, so that when there are 3 candidates and they're all professionally undistinguishable, let's say, meaning they're all qualified, um, uh, there being some way where your candidacy stands out in the form of maybe showing kind of what you would be like to work with, or something kind of more about you can help you stand out.
Got it. Thank you so much for answering that. Well, when we get to resume review, I'll talk a little bit more about this. There's a hot debate. I said I co-stream with this other fellow who's not here sometimes. We have a hot debate over the value of cover letters because within Amazon, I never see a cover letter. By the time it gets to me, it's always stripped away and I only get the resume. So I tell people, at least unless you have a direct contact for the hiring manager, unfortunately, I will never even see your cover letter that you're crafting. The recruiter might or might not, again, with a big corporate system. But I acknowledge that with a small company, that's very different. If you're working with a small company or with a placement firm, the cover letter might be seen. So given that I sort of have come down on the side of poo-pooing cover letters, I agree they shouldn't be form. If you're going to write one, write something specific. What else would you say about what should or shouldn't go in a cover letter? How long should it be? What's the relative value? Just give a few words about that.
Yeah, good, all good points. I try to make it as authentic as possible. Pretend you're writing a real email to a real person that's has a real purpose and trying to accomplish a real goal, and then just write 3 to 5 sentences about that, rather than trying to copy paste something generic or write it because someone told you to write it. Actually, write it for the purpose of saying hello, introducing yourself, um, having a real reason why you're interested in the job. I'll mention that as a point. Having a real reason why you're interested in the job, having a real reason why you're a distinguished candidate for the job may seem like a no-brainer, but it's something that most candidates don't have an authentic and distinguished answer to. So even being able to answer that in an introductory email will distinguish you from the many other candidates that aren't doing that. And just to your point, Ethan, about not seeing the cover letters that are sent to you, a technique for a candidate might be to write something and ask the recruiter to send it to their hiring leader, or when they're interviewing with a hiring leader, to ask for their email and
Mm-hmm.
ask if it's okay to send them a follow-up note. And sometimes the person might not share it, but oftentimes they will.
Yeah, I thank you for bringing that up. I strongly encourage people ask for some method to contact and follow up, because you can contact someone like me. Let's say I say, "Oh, I don't share that." You can still find me on LinkedIn and message me. Um, but normally I would share if I was interviewing someone and they ask how to follow up with me, or that they wanted to send me something, I'm always in for more data. And so if you want to send me something, great. To Boris's point, and I've made this for all of you before, most people don't do jack to stand out or follow up. Just the very idea that you want to follow up actually gives you a leg up, because most people never ask me about it. Most people go through the motions, even if they really want the job. They just do the thing, and then they're like, okay, I had a phone call. I guess they'll tell me. They're very passive. And so I tell people, find any way to get in touch with the hiring manager, the hiring team, to try and stand out. So I think we've kind of beaten that question to death. And even though it didn't have as many votes, we'll go to the next one, which honestly, Boris, this is your chance for a home run. I would say this is the number one all-time most asked question of me in career advice on job hunting, which is, how can I best explain jobs I did not have for a long time? So short stays, shorter than your 18 months, or gaps in employment history. Like when I'm interviewing or talking to a firm like yours or whatever, how can I make it seem like I'm not flaky if I had either a 6 month job, or I was out of not working for some period, 6, 12 months?
Yeah, that's a good question. And keep me honest here. Tell me to what degree I'm kind of honoring the question and offering something unique and distinguished here. Um,
Sure. Go for it. I just think even whether you say exactly what I've always said or completely different, it will be valuable.
Yeah, I think it's important to one, just be honest and authentic about what it is that did happen. Often when someone joins a company, they it's rare that they join the company with the goal of being there for a short period of time. So they likely joined with some vision in mind, and then they were there for some period of time, and then something changed that compelled them to not be there. And so I think being able to share that is valuable context for the recruiter.
Uh huh.
I think when a candidate gets in trouble isn't so much when there's one short job
Mm-hmm.
change, but when there's a pattern of
Mm-hmm.
short job changes. And when there is a pattern, I think I find it valuable when the candidate doesn't when the candidate's able to objectively look at it and say, hey, I know that I've made 3 short job changes, and that probably doesn't look good on me. And I acknowledge that. And here's a reason for the first one. Here's a reason for the second one. Here's a reason for the third one. And what I personally learned through that experience is this, this, and this is how I'm applying, those lessons to this new job search. Because the biggest fear that a recruiter has when working with a candidate who has 3 short job stints is that they didn't learn anything, and the fourth one's going to be the same
Yep.
because his history says it repeats itself. And so calling that out to the recruiter, that way the recruiter can say, okay, it really seems like this person made a couple mistakes or circumstances didn't work out their way, and it's okay because it seems like they learned because now they're applying it in XYZ fashion. I can now confidently represent them with new employer.
Okay. And what about times away from work? So I have a 8-month gap. Maybe that's because I chose to travel. Maybe that's because I couldn't find work. Maybe that's because I was caring for a sick relative. What do I put or not put? Like, when do I have to explain a gap? So if I'm 6 weeks between jobs, nobody cares. If I'm 16 months, they start to care. And if I'm 3 years, they definitely care. When do I have to comment on it, and what do I say depending on the circumstance?
I think it's I think it's generally worth it to comment on it. A recruiter will notice. So
Yeah.
like little tricks that a candidate will play um, to get a recruiter to not notice a gap will be to kind of put years only on a resume.
Mm-hmm.
That's a trick that a job hunter will do, and recruiters usually know what's going on, so they'll try to figure out the months to figure out what the gap looks like. It's okay. It's okay to have a gap. It's just like tenure at a company is less taboo. That it's shorter term now,
Yep.
similar to a gap in resume. It's okay to take time off to travel. It's okay to take time off because you've never done it before and you just want to. There's really you don't need a great reason why you just took time off. What a recruiter or a company cares about is how skilled or effective they'll be at that new job. And so if that gap becomes too long to the point where there's rustiness and then the person has challenge functioning in the new job, that's really where the concern is going to be. So, if I'm a recruiter and I've been a recruiter for 3 years and I took 1 year off, can I jump back in after a year? Maybe. Can I jump back in after a few months? Probably. Can I jump back in after 2 years? You start to. It's an open question that needs to be addressed. Um,
Okay. So I'll let you see my advice. The first thing I tell people is, yes, I tell people be honest. And it's really interesting. You present like it's going to be impossible to sneak anything by your recruiters. It's very interesting because we know that many people, unfortunately, either embellish or flat out, shall we say, edit their resumes. But you're talking about some of the common tricks, like go to only putting years on, or a lot of people will drop the GPA off their degree after a few years out of college, which usually can mean it wasn't that great, or at least that's, but it doesn't really matter too. If they've been out in the job market 3-5 years, we're not really concerned about their grades. We're concerned about how they performed. Where I'm going with this question, though, is I tell people with a gap first, if you took time off to travel the world, be proud about it. Like you don't have to brag about it, but there is nothing wrong with saying, took 8 months, visited 7 countries, explored my hereditary roots in fill in the blank. That'll fly fine with most modern tech employers. Like they won't bat an eye.
yeah, that sounds right. Especially if whatever it is that was done was in any way applicable
Mm-hmm.
to what job you're considering. So
Yep.
someone who traveled the world would have gained a considerable amount of empathy, which is hugely valuable in a sales or any sort of work where there's interaction with people involved.
Okay. Um. So next question that people are really interested in. We'll go to the next question here, which is, do recruiting agencies help an individual get to the top of a pile for a particular company, or is it generally the same application process? So I think the underlying question here is when you're retained to work on a job for Acme Inc., am I better off? Why am I better off working through Bing Search than Acme Inc.? Like applying to their web portal if I can find them. Now that assumes I can find them, but I think the question is, are you better at presenting me than maybe I am applying directly, and why?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's likely that Acme Inc. has recruiters that it employs, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes those recruiters might be actually employed by Bink, who are operating under the brand of Acme Inc. So when you apply, um, it's likely that a recruiter is receiving that resume and then following a standard process in taking that resume through the interview process and up through closure. When an external, so in that case, it doesn't matter whether it's an internal recruiter or someone from Bink that takes that applicant. Um, an external recruiter who presents a candidate, um, it depends. Sometimes it might be better for that candidate to go directly to the company. Sometimes it might be better to work with the recruiter. There isn't a direct answer for that. When a company works with an external recruiter, usually the way that external recruiter is paid is by uh, paying a commission when that candidate is hired. So by default, then a company could save themselves a fee by finding a candidate on their own or by
Yes.
picking up an applicant. Usually, the reason that they work with an external recruiter is to find candidates that they couldn't find otherwise. If you're a candidate, the reason that you'd work with an external recruiter is because that recruiter might be able to offer you a higher touch experience and more value to your job search, help you, get to that top of the pile, help you get more consideration in front of the hiring manager based on their relationship, help you negotiate a stronger compensation package than you might be able to get otherwise. It's worth it when you're engaging with a recruiter to ask them. It's worth it for a job seeker when engaging with a recruiter to ask them what their relationship with the company is, and then what the process should look like. If that sounds like a good relationship and sounds like a good process, then they should feel comfortable moving forward.
Yeah, and I would say, thank you, Boris. I would certainly say that for the place where I think a recruiter can really help is if you're not familiar with the company, the recruiter may have seen what behaviors succeed and don't, and may be able to tell you what is your interview going to consist of. They can set you up with expectations and tips that if you don't have an inside track, you may not be able to get. You may go in cold and unprepared. Now, being candid, so you know, Boris, my number one advice to people is try to find the hiring manager. Try to work through networking as the best way to get a job, right? But that fails, and lots of people. That also assumes that you're actively searching, as opposed to a passive candidate where you call me. But for the people searching for a job, if they can find a way, that may be a great tactic. But if they haven't, or if they don't have that connection, a professional recruiter, a placement firm can be great at knowing the context of what the company's looking for and how to put your best self forward to them. Just
Right.
like they can help you understand what is a good offer and what isn't. And help you. If you're not a strong negotiator, they may be able to help you some with getting a fair offer. And by the way, for everyone listening, the recruiter has at least some incentive to get you a good offer, not only in hopes that you'll take it, but because they're normally paid a percentage. So the better your offer, the better their payday, to some degree anyway. And so they're while their number one goal is to fill the role, it benefits them if you do well going into that role. So
That's right. Yeah, that makes sense, and that sounds about right. Um, that sounds right.
okay, we'll do a couple more questions, then we'll look at some of the resumes. This one may be a little bit harder for you, but it's common because a lot of the audience here is international or global. And so the next question is, if you're trying to find a job in a different country, how can you leverage recruiters more effectively? So the common use case here, of course, would be people who aren't in the U.S., as an example, and are hoping to come here. And they have a very hard time. They don't know our culture. They don't know all the smaller companies. They may not have visas lined up. And I know that some firms simply wouldn't touch that. It's too much complexity. But what can you say about the people who are, there's just a question, any Canadians in chat, um, people who are trying to come across an international border for a job? Because I'm sure in the tech industry that's common for you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say because coming back to what I earlier point about recruiters being incentivized to fill jobs or to hire people for the companies they work for,
Uh huh.
and knowing that placing someone or helping to hire someone internationally is going to require at least two additional hurdles that someone not international will require. One hurdle is the international relocation, the physical move. The second hurdle is any immigration related items. To the extent that if the international candidate is motivated to be considered for a local job, to the extent they could address those two hurdles up front in their interest to make a connection, that would help the recruiter feel incentivized to invest energy. So if you're an international candidate looking to engage with a local recruiter, say in Silicon Valley or Seattle or LA or something like that, um, addressing one, your readiness and perhaps timeline to move from whatever country you're from to local, that'd be a big one. And then two, doing your homework on any immigration related items, and addressing them so that the recruiter feels comfortable with both those hurdles able to be cleared. Once those two hurdles are cleared, then you're able to be considered amongst all local candidates, knowing that again those two hurdles can be cleared upon company wanting to hire you.
Awesome. Thank you. So what I'm going to do now, folks, is I'm going to swap over. And Boris, this is where you may need to look at the actual stream. I'm going to swap over to a resume Boris sent over. We're going to do some of the resumes from the stream, but I'm going to swap over first to one that he said was one of his favorites. So what I did is I asked Boris to look up some great resumes and some poor ones. And the big white box at the top of this is where I removed the personal information of the individual. And I've blown this up a fair amount. We can see if I can blow it up a little more. Now it's really big. This resume, let's see, is the one he said was among his favorites. Wow, I'm like a dangerous driver here. So there it is at max size. Boris, we do resume reviews here all the time. What made you, of the thousands or tens of thousands, feel that this was an excellent resume?
Yeah, great question. So a couple things jumped out. One, it's short and simple, so I don't need to scan multiple pages to understand to understand the candidate. I'm able to look at it in one page. If this resume was 2 pages, it would have been just fine as well. If it was longer, it would have been, in my opinion, on the too long side. Um,
Okay.
I'm
So
able
1 to 2 pages is your rule then.
1 or 2 pages is what I happen to like. Just knowing how long it takes to scan a
Mm-hmm.
resume. The longer it takes me to find the key vitals in a resume, the less it becomes my favorite. In this case, I'm looking for the job experience. So couple of main things that at least we look for in the companies that we serve. We look for recent company experience or roles that they've worked on. So here I'm able to see that really quickly. The company name, the location of the company, the job they held, the duration, and a bullet or two about the job. I would have been okay with even 3 to 4 bullets per job. Definitely don't need much more than that. And then I'm able to very sequentially see what the candidate did experience wise. I'll want to note in our market, education or degree is an indicator that our clients like to look for, and so I want to here I'm able to very quickly see the education. Um, I bounce back and forth there. I've seen some resumes that have education above experience. I personally like it when it's below and doesn't take as headline of a view. Um, and then right up at the top, the profile is a nice summary of the person. It's a nice way to share some highlights of the career, some key skills that the person has worked on. And I saw some resumes, and I shared a couple resumes that don't have a high level profile, and it misses an opportunity to tell something about yourself. And so for those reasons, this one stood out as my favorite.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. I just discovered a tragedy, which is somehow the I didn't submit the update to the drink of the day, um, so that people could tell what I was having. But there it is, folks. It's the blueberry lemon drop martini. So we're going to get into it on this one, and I'm wondering if it's the difference between what a recruiter needs and what you need. But that'll be good. It'll be educational. So let's talk about it. Number one thing uh, is debate on should a resume. This one says profile, which is an unusual choice of words at the top. Should a resume have a summary, an objective, both, neither? What would you say about should I have at the top? I talk a lot about the value if it isn't super clear, like if you're not clearly a software engineer applying to a software engineering job, stating what the heck it is you're looking for. But what's your opinion on summary, objective, none of the above, or
Yeah,
both?
I'd probably optimize for objective first.
Okay.
Uh, After objective, uh, so objective number one, summary number two, both number, actually, objective number one, both number two, just summary number three, and then neither would be the least ideal.
Okay. So you agree with me then that an objective is very important. This resume that you've called out as liking didn't have one. So I'm curious a little bit about that. Would this be improved? I think this resume would be improved because the person has the experience they have is not super obvious how it all ties together. Because there's translator, there's foreign currency trader, there's children's learning center, there's all these different things. And so I would think I can't just infer, oh, software job, software job, software job must be a software engineer. I would think objective is super critical here, but you didn't happen to mention that. Do I read that
But
right or not?
I think from the lens of a recruiter is tasked with looking for a specific set of attributes to fill an open role that they have. So from a recruiter's perspective, they're less interested in the objective, and they're more interested in the experience and attributes of their background matching the roles that they have. Now, an objective would certainly be helpful, but it's not necessarily critical to that recruiter being able to identify that candidate as a great fit. But I do agree with you that an objective is um, a valuable component of a great resume.
All right. Well, that's good. So that's probably my first thing. Now, here's a place where I think your recruiting needs and my needs differ. I Are you familiar with the STAR recruiting acronym? Situation, task, action, result. Is that something you've heard before for interviewing?
No.
Okay. So it's a part of behavioral interviewing. And the idea is that the perfect interview question, ultimately, you're looking to see what situation were the people in, what task were they working on, what action did they take, and what result did they generate. And so when we interview, free tip for you, Boris, we're interviewing looking for those four things. But what's missing in this resume that I think would, and again, this resume is it covers a relatively short period of history, and it seems like a relatively entry level person, but there are no stated results. None of the, or they're not super clearly stated where they don't come out and say, I did this thing. There is a couple places where they list accomplishments. So I'll retract what I said. This resume calls out results under accomplishment. So basically they say what they did and then they say this is what happened. How important do you feel it is for a resume to get to that conclusion of not just what did I do, but what resulted from that.
That's a good that's a good call out. I'll say from a resume review perspective, it's a good point. So including the results is certainly valuable. Um, the the more the role is aligned to what's considered to be a clear and tangible result, like sales or recruiting, the more I would expect to see clear results. The less a role seems to be aligned with at least my association of clear and visible results. Like, if I were to review the resume of an accountant, I may not, and I don't recruit for accountants. I could be, see, I could sound totally ignorant here, but I wouldn't expect to see how many, tax returns someone filed in their results. I may ask that during an interview with them, but I wouldn't, judge a resume based on seeing that or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if the resume that I was looking at matched the employer type, the role type, and the general demographics of who I'm looking for in a candidate, I'd be able to suss out some of those things that you're mentioning being important in a resume in the initial interview with that candidate. And I wouldn't necessarily judge them, one way or the other based on it being there or not.
It's a good point. Ultimately, we're going to ask those things in an interview, but I
Right.
do think when I get given resumes, if it calls out strong results, like this actually does, I missed them on my first scan because I was just reading the lines and not reading the accomplishment below. But like the Children's Learning Server, Center in the middle, built revenues through direct student recruitment and cooperative local network. The only thing I would like to know more about that is by what percent or by how much. So, all right, cool. Well, we've beaten this resume a little bit to death. Let me take a minute. I'll come back to our view with the two of us here, and I will see if I can pull up one of the resumes that you didn't dislike, but weren't as fond of, shall we say? Um, and so let's see. I'll swap back to the other view, and it'll take just a minute for Boris to see this view over on the stream.
I'm scared now to go into some of these details because from a recruiter's perspective, we really only spend 30 seconds on a resume, which really, saying that out loud really doesn't do justice to the amount of kind of effort and energy that I'm sure people put
No, but
into
I tell
writing a
people the
resume.
same thing. This will be good advice, though. Um, First, you have to realize you're writing a resume for multiple people. You are writing it for a recruiter. You may be writing it for a professional placement recruiter. You may be writing it for an internal recruiter. You may be writing it for a hiring manager. And you kind of get one piece of paper that has to serve all of them. But what I tell people, and I'd love your comment, Boris, on is this good advice or not? I tell them each line on a resume has to earn the next one getting read. And so, since time is limited, I'm trying my opening line, and that's why I believe in an objective, has to be strong enough to hook people. And then I get to go from there, but I have to grab people and bring them in. And then I have to earn that line after line. And so maybe after I've had a few good lines, I keep them even if I have a lame line. But I'm curious, is that mindset of I have to earn attention line by line a reasonable way to think of a resume?
Um, I don't know that it's line by line. I think from a recruiter's perspective, and I'm looking at this resume and I find myself zoned in to the things that you've blocked, the little squares you've blacked out. Like
Well,
what company?
yeah, they're big white
I
areas.
know,
Yeah.
I know. But like what company did this person work for what amount of time, in what job? Like that's what I'm looking for. And so there's so much on this resume that I would consider that I would never read, or that I
Yes.
consider to be third or fourth order of
Yes.
importance.
So, well, let's switch to that. See, there's a lot of things in this resume, and the chat's saying a lot of yikes things about this, which I agree with. This is not a great resume, but just critique it for a minute. What would you say the author should change here?
So, from a recruiter's perspective, I'd never read that first paragraph, that top paragraph that says skills. I just simply wouldn't read it. I'd ignore it, and then I'd go straight to um, the role the person held, the company that they work for, which is blotted out right now, and I'd look at that through the full resume, and I'd develop an opinion. Is this person a no? Is this person a yes, or it's a maybe? If they're a no, I wouldn't move forward. If they're a yes, I'd move forward regardless of reading anything else. If they're a maybe, then I'd go on and read further. Um, this person actually includes quite a decent amount of valuable information that's not commonly included in in people that have this background. So like the types of metrics that they recruited for, that they the types of metrics, the types of recs, that's quite valuable information in evaluating someone like this that usually I wouldn't learn until I interview this person. But because they're putting it there, I'm able to I'm able to judge it, and it's able to add a nice amount of color to what to the company and the role that they held.
So one of the things that you keep coming back to, which I totally get, is since a recruiter is going to spend about 30 seconds on a resume, unless it's unusual, we talk a lot about use of white space and making the resume easy to scan. Um, and I assume you agree with that, right? That the obviously recruiters are very trained at reading whatever kind of junk they get, unfortunately, because they may recognize that a good candidate can be hidden behind a poorly done resume.
Right.
But what makes it I guess the way to phrase this question for you is what makes a resume really easy for you to digest?
That's a good question, and that's what I liked about the resume right before.
Yes.
You knew where the experience was, you knew where the education was, and it was very scannable in a very short amount of time. This, just due to formatting, isn't as easily scannable, and
Right.
so I now have to kind of break from my process of reviewing resumes and deciding who I'm going to evaluate and not, and read deeper. And it makes recruiters. I mean, I'd probably sound really shallow from a recruiter perspective, like, oh, now I have to spend 3 minutes reading instead of 30 seconds. But in the business that we're in, and the amount of review that's commonly done, it breaks that pattern. Um, but in this case, so from a values perspective, that top skills paragraph, um, I can it, I couldn't even tell you what that says. It'd be a very difficult thing to read, and there's very little value that's being received from it. So that's a not effective use of resume space there.
I have to admit now, chat, by the way, I don't have it on this computer. I was just looking. I'm like super eager to show. I did a resume when I was on Devin's channel. Devin and I both did our own resumes and presented them and discussed the pros and cons. And it would be super interesting to see how my resume, which I wrote just as an example, stacked up. So what I'll do is I'll mail it to Boris offline, and in some future chat, we'll get his teardown of what I did well and poorly. I think that would be fun, because well, it will also be good for me, but I think it would be fun to understand, like, how did I score in the recruiter resume review. So what let's do now, it's going to take me just a minute to download a couple of these. But I'm going to grab a couple of the resumes from the people who are actually here watching, the people who've submitted them over the past couple days in our resume review channel. And I think we just have 3. So it'll take me just a minute, but they're all pre-anonymized. So they're very quick for me to be able to grab them. And so I'm doing that. Meanwhile, let's see if I can swap over. We'll give Boris a question to answer, and that'll keep
Keep me busy.
yeah, well, it'll give something so that, yeah, everyone's got something good to talk about. So hang on one second. The next question people wanted to ask is, generally being rather close to a bachelor's degree, 4 to 5 classes away, would I still be able to list I'm rather close to a degree but needed a break from college, say reason being mental drain from college grind? So let me generalize that for you a little bit, Boris. The number one question, if the number one question I get is what to do with a gap, the number two question I get is how do I handle the fact I didn't finish college? That's like I've answered that question 25 times over the course of a year. How would you say I present myself as I'm not a loser, but it's true I didn't finish college?
Ethan, did I
We
phrase?
lost with the internet glitch there. I don't know if you heard the last of that.
I heard the question in summary is how do you address almost finishing a degree?
Yes.
Is that the
Please,
question?
please, please. Super popular question. Your opinion would be great.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what I see most common is someone would put the school they went to, the degree, and then they'd put maybe in parentheses several classes pending or quarter pending or something like that. And in that case, the person either has chosen to not finish or has chosen to push off finishing or plans to finish at some future point. Again, like with anything, it's best to be as transparent as possible. Um, some recruiters, when looking at a resume that doesn't have a completed degree, if the company requires a completed degree, they won't engage with that person, and so there's not much that somebody can do right there because it is a requirement that won't be able to be overcome. Um, if that conversation is happening in an initial interview, we're moving to a society. We're moving to a place right now where it's more acceptable to be perfectly qualified for a job and either not have a degree or only be a percentage of the way towards a degree. So in that case, just addressing your reasons for not completing that degree, and then refocusing energies towards whatever it is that the actual criteria for the role may be. Um, I think if you're working with a recruiter or a company that places less value in degree and more on skills, whatever you say as your reason will likely be okay, and you'll be able to move forward. If you happen to be dealing with an organization that has that degree as a requirement, regardless of what you say, it'll likely be a reason to not move forward.
And how common would you say is it in the tech industry which you serve for degrees to be a true requirement? Like everyone puts it down as BS and CS or equivalent experience preferred. How much is it a requirement or not on average? Would you say across tech?
We're definitely trending towards it being removed as a requirement. We're trending there. No, we're not. I don't know where we are in that
Yeah.
curve, but I'd say coin toss, right? 50-50, let's say right now, whether a company that lists a degree as a requirement is actually going to stand firm on that as a requirement versus not. This is in the tech space.
Yep. And definitely, I know uh, some of the people here in other industries, and some industries like pharma appear to use a degree as a pretty strong filter.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
no degree, don't bother. Like you're just wasting your breath. All right, so I'll swap this over. You should be able to see it in a second, Boris, when it rolls through the stream. This is somebody who is a regular member of our stream. I can scroll this down when you want to see more of it. But tell me what you look at here. What grabs you? What doesn't? How does this scan? And obviously, they've anonymized this one pretty heavily by just calling it employer one, employer two.
Yeah. So looking at this resume, I like that. Um, so I could tell the person's location. I'll just say out loud
Yeah,
as I
please
as I
just
scan
talk
it.
through it. That's
Yeah.
great.
I like the person's location so I can get what their proximity to employment is. I like they have a GitHub profile, so if I want to click on that, I can go do that. Or if I know that my employer values GitHub, there's something to see in the form of work. I like that the skills that they list are limited to what I interpret as being real skills versus 60
Alphabet soup.
skills. Yeah,
Yep.
that's right. A trick that I learned from a hiring leader is that most people put their strongest skill first versus last. So in this case, I know Go to be a compelling technology followed by C++. So I could pretty quickly start to kind of focus in on what this person can do, and that's only at the skills level. Then experience. So let's say I could, I'll be able to see the employer they worked for and the job that they were in a really short amount of time. I'd wonder why they didn't put any bullets under employer one. But it wouldn't. But if I like the person's background, it wouldn't stand in my way of wanting to interview them. And then the bullets under employer 2 and 3 give me a sense of the job that the person was in. So I'm seeing things like architected and lead, and so I'd want to know to what degree this person developed versus designed and led. But that's kind of job specific nuance. And then getting into the school. So great that I can pick up on this person's educational background. Coursework is less important in this case because of the amount of experience that this person has, though nice that they included it. And then projects is also nice to the degree that I didn't read it in depth, but to the degree that projects maybe talks to something that is of interest in the open role that may not be noted in the experience, then that's great. And then others also nice to have. Sometimes recruiters will specifically look for what this person listed as other as an attribute of likelihood of fit. So like coding competitions.
All right.
We'll look for.
So I tend to give resumes a letter grade, where A means great, very little to improve. F means, wow, you're really shooting yourself in the foot. Even if a dedicated specialist like you might be able to pick it apart. How would you grade this resume?
I'd give it a B plus, A minus. I think it's a very good resume.
And I agree. Um, I agree very much that this resume, uh, and I think this viewer might be over in the EU and may not be here right now. So I hope I'll reveal enough to say, see, this is leaked. I'll say he appears to be a he, and I do think, I wonder if the reason that employer one has no bullets is knowing that a review session was coming. That may be the person's current job. I agree with you. The one thing that keeps this from being a full A is the lack of information under your current job. I'm guessing that's they grabbed their old resume and threw the current experience on it in order to send it. But otherwise, I would say this is a very solid resume. They have results, which I care a lot about, increased uptime, because again, I'm giving the hiring manager perspective. When I get this resume, to me, it is incredibly important that I know, oh, hey, this person is claiming that they moved from 1 9 of uptime to 4 9s of uptime, which for the geeks here, that's an incredibly tough accomplishment. And I could do a whole interview on whether or not that line is true. Rockstar OG here in chat says quad 9 is a solid result, which is exactly why I would dig in. I would want to know how did you know? How did you measure? What did you do? How did you alarm? If you're really measuring to 4 9s, what was your actual hours of downtime a year? But that kind of thing just gives me so much fact. That said, super scannable. There isn't an objective, but this person really doesn't need one because it reads Software Geek top to bottom. So that's the one case where you can get away without it. It gives their history. They've got a long work history. It gives their projects. And then, the other. So, all right, this is a great resume. I'll take this down real quick and see if I can get us another. This is like a great tag team. So if you folks have more questions for Boris, This is your chance to put them in, because as I go through the next couple of resumes, we'll do a couple more questions, and then he's been very generous with his time. We'll let him go. So your question to fill time here, Boris, is I'm finishing my first year as a STEM master's program and applying for internships. We have a lot of people looking for internships, which I know is not what you normally do. Since most positions are being canceled or hiring has frozen, what are some alternatives I should look into for experience? So this comes down to, like, we haven't talked a bunch about managing a downturn, particularly as a student. What do I do if my normal sources of employment, whether full-time or part-time, are closed? What should I do in this difficult set of circumstances? And while you answer, I will get us another resume queued up.
Great. I've thought a lot about this because there's a lot of unemployed people right now that are trying to distinguish themselves in the eyes of employers. In my professional opinion, the best thing you could do in this case, instead of an internship, and the best thing you could do while being unemployed to distinguish in the eyes of an employer is figure out a way to show someone what you could do versus telling someone what you can do. And so an example of what someone with an engineering background can show what they could do is, find something to build, and then put it out into the world. So build a website, build a mobile app, go build something and put it up on a GitHub, write some code. If you're an internship focused on some demographic of technology, scope out that internship, scope out what you could build over a 12-week period, the same period of time that you might naturally have an internship, and run that 12 weeks the same way that you would for any given company, but run it in a self-managed way. So say over the course of the 12-week period, I'm going to build a mobile app. And I'm going to build a mobile app that's going to do X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to spend the first 2 weeks scoping, then I'm going to spend the next 2 weeks designing, then I'm going to build it, then I'm going to publish it, then I'm going to iterate on it, and I'm going to describe my self-made internship to the world on my resume, and I'll actually be able to point to it in the form of a downloadable mobile app. That's, if I were this person, that's what I would go do.
So that is that's fantastic advice. That's a do-it-yourself unpaid internship, which I love. I think maybe you could talk to some companies, some local companies, some startups, and do it with a real application. Volunteer for free. There are ways to maybe up level it so you have a reference or something, but maybe not. Regardless, I'm 100% in agreement with Boris that the answer is demonstrate your skills. I know you desperately need the money from an internship, but if you can't get that, and you're not going to get it anyway, demonstrate your skills. That is so powerful. And Hephaestus, who's one of our great commenters here, has said you could volunteer. I bet he can weigh forth on that. That said, this is a resume. It is anonymized. The person has it. I'll flip over and show it. Rockstar OG is here in chat. He wants to know about his resume. So Boris, take it away. What do you see in this one? And I'll scroll down here in a minute.
Okay, so let's see. Computer skills. Okay, I'm going to acknowledge the skills. Okay, I appreciate the difference between proficient in and familiar with. Then I'll quickly move forward to, okay, so works for university, assistant technology specialist. I'll want to know, it's tough to tell from the perspective of employment for university what scale and experience looks like compared to a non-university setting. So in this case, it would be helpful. I'm finding myself curious how this work at the university matches to whatever it is that this person is looking for in the form of a non-university role. So some sense of scale, some sense of size, some sense of purpose for wherever it is that they were in university would be helpful here. And I'm that would influence my decision to follow up with this person or not. So they note some of the experiences that some of what they accomplished or some of the experience they had while at university. So I definitely appreciate that. Let's see. Okay. They mentioned a little bit about being in the army. There's some connection between the work they did in the army and the work they did in the university. And I'm a little quiet. You tell that I'm thinking. I'm trying to figure
Yeah,
out
yeah.
date overlap. So I'm trying to figure out what the date overlap between university to present is.
Yeah, and I can scroll back up. It looks like it was a year.
But it looks like there's a little bit of a date overlap between time spent in U.S. Army. That was 12 to 18. So it looks like some time was spent in the Army while in university, perhaps. And so I'm trying to do the math on that.
Yep. About a year, it looks like.
Yep. Yeah, that's about what I would. The shift delivery driver doesn't seem relevant here, so I'd probably exclude that from here. The
Yep.
shift lead delivery driver doesn't seem relevant. And the projects is interesting. I'd want to know the projects in the way that it's written here seem. I don't know where they happen. I don't know when they happen. I don't know in what world they happen. So I'd want to know more about those projects. With regards to some of the things that like, did they happen this year? Did they happen like 7 years ago?
Mhm. Okay. So you'd want times on the projects or dates. I'm guessing that since the person's a current student graduating in 2020, that their academic projects in the last 4 or 5 years. So this is someone who, I mean, if you reconstruct this story, what I get from it is worked in the army, perhaps in the reserves, in order to get money for college, and is now both finishing college and was working part-time in that college, right? That's the full reconstructed story. So Rockstar, is that correct? Put in chat if that's your real history or if I've misinterpreted, because that will tell you something about your resume. Um, Meanwhile, it is interesting, Boris. Let's debate. Rockstar has obviously edited his resume to my advice, which thank you. I feel honored by that. I tell people if they've done some hard, grindy job like Jimmy John's and they have relatively little experience, they should go ahead and list it without taking up or burning a lot of space, essentially because it shows character. Like they've done the hard knocks, grindy thing to move themselves forward. And so it's worth this half inch of space to indicate, like, no, I understand what real work looks like. What's your thought on that? You said you'd exclude it as basically a distraction. So give me your 2 seconds on that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wouldn't disagree with what you're saying around that read on this resume. When I first read this resume, I didn't read it that way. I read it as something that doesn't fit the narrative, and so you know um,
Yeah.
I
And
might just from like a resume advice. Now hearing your narrative, which it sounds like that makes a ton of sense, because obviously I wasn't able to kind of pick up on that in reading this. I might maybe shorten some of those skills up at the top and make that context clear to whoever it is that's reading it, maybe in the form of an objective or in the form of a summary,
yep.
help them capture it.
And I agree with that. And that it does turn out Rockstar's here in chat and he says, correct, I work as a student worker for my university. The Jimmy John stuff was to show long-term employment history. Your resume is pretty good, but our professional recruiter here mistook things a couple ways, and you can clarify that. And I do agree, you're using a lot of real estate up top for the computer skills. There's no objective of what you want, and an objective gives you the chance to set context and say, graduating student with whatever military experience and extensive during school tech work. You'd have to reword that a little. Seeks blah blah blah. Gives you a chance to frame the resume, whereas you just drop me in cold into your skills, and that leads to misinterpretation because Boris and I had to do archaeology to figure out, for me to piece together the narrative of, oh, you're just now graduating in 2020. So your graduation is now. That means obviously you're a student worker in this job up here, and therefore these projects are all stuff you did in school. So you're making me do the archaeology. All right, Boris, letter grade.
Um, I'd probably give it like a B minus or so.
Yeah, that's about where I'd put it. So, Rockstar, you have a lot of good feedback here. You have a chance to absolutely get this to an A. You've got good experience for a new grad. Look, I'd rather be in your shoes working at the university and having been in the army coming out into the current employment than the people who, frankly, like me, had a great, I didn't ever have to work before college, and you have a leg up in terms of grit. So, all right, Boris, you game for like one or two more cycles through this quick washing machine?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add to Rockstar that veterans of the armed services are um, highly sought after in the technology industry from a diversity demographics perspective. So highlighting that upfront in an objective would be hugely worthwhile for you.
All right. Well, that's good news, and that's very interesting because we have a number of veterans here.
That's great.
Um, all right. Next question for you, Boris. To buy a bit of time, should you treat your cover email as an elevator pitch explaining why specifically you're a good fit for the role, or do they expect a summary of your resume? So maybe generalizing this, you said it should be authentic, but what makes a good cover letter?
Um, a good cover letter would be it would include a sentence or so about yourself, a sentence or so about why you're interested in the role, um, and a sentence or so just appreciating you know the role or the position that whoever it is that you're emailing might be in. So that's three sentences. Maybe you could expand that out to five. Um, but some version of those three points. Uh, Empathy for person, a bit about your situation, and a bit about why you.
Okay, fantastic. I'm so fascinated by the resume we're about to do that I'm busy staring at it rather than bringing it up for review. So it's loading now. It's going to take just a second. And for whatever reason, my machine has decided that this is when it doesn't want to go quickly. All right, here we go. Good old Google. All right, this one will be fun. We're going to get all kind. This one will be a hot topic. So, Boris, here you go. And this is Perpetual White Belt in chat. He's here ready for roast a Rooney.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. So, okay, the name is clear. I like the I like the job titles right underneath it. So data scientist, machine learning researcher is grabbing my attention. Brazilian jiu-jitsu enthusiast is you know a nice inclusion to stand out. So to your earlier example, Ethan, in this case, putting Brazilian jiu-jitsu tells me a lot about this person's character, just based on what I know
Requires.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And I'm actually sorry, and I find myself getting confused between enthusiast and someone who actually practices jujitsu. So I'll maybe take that back a little bit. Um, okay, then let's see some work experience. I'm not sure why the circle in the top left.
Probably a
Oh,
picture was
maybe a
there,
picture.
is
Okay,
my
okay.
guess. But white belt, why? Tell us in chat why the circle.
I kind of like the circle without it. It makes me curious. But if there's a picture there, then it's good to know.
Yeah.
Let's see, research labs, some university. So university always jumps out at me. Similar to the last kid, I'm always curious what how the university compares.
Right. And obviously on a real resume, you'd have that. This is just the problem is this stuff lives on YouTube forever, and so we want to make sure that the people, uh, they have a chance to distance themselves from their edited resume. Is why we take some of this data off of here.
Yep.
It's
Makes
also
sense.
actually against Twitch terms of service for me to out someone's personally identifiable information. So that's what's going on here.
Yep. Makes
But
sense.
yep, go ahead.
And so I guess seeing university, I then pretty quickly want to jump down to the bottom to see if they are still in school, and so whether to kind of evaluate them as a university hire or fresh grad of some degree, or of
Well, there you go. It's BML Munjal University, which I'm assuming, since they call it Unknown in Indian University, is actually the university. And it's true, it's unknown. So
okay.
they're going to an unknown Indian university. Certainly a liability, right? Just straight up.
Yeah. And so in this case, the person graduated in 2018, so I have a few years of experience. So I'm wondering, I'm now going to go back up to the resume, up
Yep.
to the top, and then evaluate their experience
So they went
based.
into the research lab, right? That's clearly what happened. Is maybe at a different university, maybe at the same one. Probably. Well,
That's
we
what it
can.
looks like. So it looks like they took a job at, first it was an internship. So it looks like it was a postgraduate internship, and then they went into the research lab. So I would just want to know about that. I would say if this person's educational background, like the specific stuff they studied. So with data science, there is a correlation between what they studied, and it's common to hire in industry straight from university based on the relevance of whatever their kind of thesis was. So I'd want to go look at the specifics of that. I don't see. Yes, I'd go look at. I don't see a ton under education. So usually someone that is coming out of the data science field or someone that's going into data science would have more in education. Usually there's a
Do you think
master's
it's
or a
in this
PhD.
section publications? Is that the closest thing where they're listing the papers they published?
It
That
might be. Usually data scientists have PhDs. A junior data scientist will have a master's degree.
okay?
So this is a bachelor's, and so um, I wouldn't. This resume wouldn't qualify for a data scientist role based on their educational background.
Okay.
But from just like a resume design perspective, I generally don't like the use of color and the use of kind of grabby design. But in this case, it works. I do like I like the red color and the contrasting with the black. I like the few job titles and the personalization up top. I like the design of the name. So in this case, it's not distracting, and it's able to give me what I want in the form of information. So even though I don't see a fit for maybe what this person is likely applying for, I would rate this resume pretty high from a design perspective.
Well, there you go. So overall, what would you grade this one?
Probably give it like a B plus A minus,
That's
close for the first one.
yeah. So uh, you bailed me out because when you said you don't like color, I often advise people, and then you said you like the little touches of color. I definitely don't like resumes that are like go too far, but I think a little bit of color can make it a little bit better than just flat black. And so this person did that, and I'm glad that you came around to that.
Yep.
They also obviously have some hot links in here. Most resumes are now electronic. What would you say about the value of linkable resumes?
Which parts are linked? So
So the ETS is a link, the platform is a link. These pink pieces, it may be hard for you to tell, but
yeah.
the stuff that's more pink than red, like ETS and platform, are hot links, where I've highlighted there. What do you think about in at least a more tech resume, the digital copy having live links?
I think it's a good idea. It makes it
Yep.
makes it easier for the reader to connect. And 99.9% of resumes are reviewed electronically, not in a printed format. So it totally fits.
Uh, okay. So there's a good question came up in chat about this. The jujitsu seems like a personal element rather than a business element. Does the guest suggest we slightly pepper the resume with small anecdotes like that? Um,
I think in if it's not distract, I think in this case it works. It gives a little bit of color to this person's personality, and makes the person seem more, human and approachable. If the person put, black belt Brazilian jiu-jitsu, then, to Ethan's earlier point, I would have gotten to know this little more about this person's character, this person's work ethic, and, whatever else, is able to be learned from just that little bit of information. And you could put anything there. It could be cooking. It could be, fanatic of, some hobby, or whatever it is.
well,
And just
now you've broken into jail. We'll have to ask. A lot of people here play a lot of esports. If they've actually done something meaningful with an esport, for example, organized a team, run a league, been a part of a competitive, say, ranked video game world, are video games still tainted? And all that means to a recruiter or a hiring manager is you're living in your mom's basement covered in Cheeto dust? Or can it be a positive? How would you advise people when it comes to accomplishments related to video gaming?
I think it probably depends on the job. I think in the job you're applying for, if you're applying for the technology industry, and there's a reasonable likelihood that the people you're presenting to have some familiarity or affinity for whatever it is that you're putting there. I think it's totally reasonable. If you're applying to what may seem like an if you're
A
applying to like
bank,
a bank, and then putting that you're a street, putting that you're
a Twitch
a,
streamer, for
a Twitch
example,
streamer
or a YouTube personality?
or a gamer or something like that. I mean, maybe it'll stand out, but maybe it'll also distract. And so you want to speak to your audience in some way. But in general, the world is becoming more personalized. I think what we're experiencing right now with COVID and people working from home is certainly accelerating that considerably. And so I think it's more okay to be yourself and risk not getting hired. I think that's okay.
Okay. All right. So we'll do one more resume and we'll let Boris go. My comments on this resume generally pretty good. You don't have a pure objective, and you've been in a few different places. It's a little bit tough to know what you're looking for. In chat, you told me that the university you're working in, the research lab, is different than the one you went to and is a better university. So that makes a big advantage. Actually, Boris, this is a question I want to hit you with earlier. On the resume where I had blanked out the person's jobs, how much does a brand name job versus a non-brand name job help me? So in other words, let's assume I'm writing down the exact same accomplishments with the exact same bullets and details about what I did. But on one resume, I'm an SDE, whatever. I'm not sure how they level them, but I'm an SDE 2 or a mid-level SDE at Google. And in the other one, I'm the same mid-level title, but frankly, at a company you as a recruiter haven't heard of. So Des Moines Analytics or Rochester Software Inc. How does that impact? How much does the Google job help me or not?
Yeah, I want to. It'll help. Having the Google job or the branded experience will help you a lot. I have the number 100 times in my head, although maybe it's 20. I don't know the actual difference, but it'll help you
Wow.
a lot.
Okay. Can you?
Because yeah,
That's shocking to me. And I don't weight it. I definitely agree it helps. I don't weight it that highly. When I'm personally reviewing resumes to hire for my team, although I admit it helps, but I would not say 20x. Tell us all a little bit more about why the branded company experience punches so heavily in your view.
great question. There's two reasons for that. One is the size and scale of operation. So when someone comes from Google, you can assume, or the industry expects that person to have experience with a certain amount of scale, and whatever scale it is that they associate with Google versus Des Moines analytics. You'll either not know or assume a considerably smaller amount of scale that was done there. Um, so that's reason number one. And reason number two is Google, for better or for worse, is has developed a reputation for quality hiring. And so because by sheer ability to work for Google, you're telling the recruiter that you were able to get hired by Google, which there's a brand associated with high quality employment. And so those two things, um, those are the two things that a recruiter or resume reviewer takes away from seeing Google on the resume, that they don't that they can't assume when they see Des Moines. Now maybe Des Moines Analytics equally has that high quality hiring bar. The world just doesn't know, or maybe they do have that scale. The world just doesn't know.
So I can't help. I'm going to comment on that in a second because this is a question I really. What would you then say? How much? Because I get this question a lot too. How much does the elite tier university help or not? So MIT versus State University of New York, Stony Brook, which is a very solid school, but clearly not MIT.
Yeah, that's a good question, and you're asking a question that's at the very root of a pretty massive diversity problem
Yes.
in the technology industry. And
Yes.
so, because of factors associated with acceptance into these elite universities and factors associated with employment at these elite at these elite employment organizations like Google. And recruiters looking solely for those indicators, it excludes a massive majority of what can be a very qualified workforce. And so you are seeing in the technology industry a movement, a similar trend that I mentioned earlier, away from university as a requirement. There's an equal trend away from those two attributes being key criteria, and
Mm.
rather identifying ways to evaluate the candidate based on their merit, which is code writing or whatever the merit of the role may require. So we're not there, but we're trending there, and I think we'll get there.
That's a really good point. It's a discussion I can't speak about extensively, but I definitely hear, which is one of the things we're interested in is they learned in symphonies that if they change the recruiting for an open spot in the symphony from the candidates playing in front of the evaluators to the candidates playing from behind a screen where you couldn't see anything about the candidate, you could only hear how they played the trumpet or how they played the violin, that the diversity hiring went way up. And so if you were showing the candidate to, unfortunately, the evaluators, they were clearly applying visual aspects to whether or not they hired the person. We're looking at how could we develop the equivalent in tech. How could we head down that way? Because if what you want is someone who plays the violin the best, it should matter how the violin sounds. So
Right.
the same theoretically is true with writing software. So, all right, we'll do one more quick resume here. It's the last person who sent one in, I believe. And don't send any more tonight, folks. I won't get to them. Let me show this to Boris and then let him go. So here's one more to react to. Talk us through it real quick.
Okay. So let's see. So getting past the name, getting into the professional skills, there are more development languages, environments, and software than ideal. So um, I would generally just glance at this,
Okay.
um, and then I would move on. There are some languages here. I'll just say some languages that don't commonly go together in in a person's background, which tells me that maybe the person was a little generous. Um, in their experience. So, okay, so then moving on down. So the person was an independent consultant. Uh, I appreciate that the person grouped their independent consulting experience in one common experience. Many don't always do that, and so that's nice. And now I want to know. Now I'm thinking that lumping into the last 5 years was too general, and now I want to know what specifically they did. So for whom did they independently consult, and on what types of projects? Because I doubt that this was for one. I see one project mentioned in here, and I wonder why they picked that one versus what I could only assume to be many others. And then it goes down to intern, and then so let's see. Then I'm going to go down to so scientific papers. Uh, yeah, I wouldn't expect this person to this background to have a scientific paper, and so I don't know how much value that's going to add. And then degree. Okay, so that's great. So I appreciate that it's then short on the shorter side, one page. And so if this person's if the experience this person had happened to match a role that I was working on, I may be curious enough to reach out to them, though I may also assume that I may not be intrigued enough by the general nature of independent consultant skills that I may just not move forward, assuming that there isn't something interesting there.
Wah wah. Sorry, contestant. Um, I'm known, by the way, Boris, as the assassin. So you're don't feel bad about harsh reviews. We give those out all the time. Uh, you called out something I haven't heard before, but I completely agree with. I call these skill sections the alphabet soup section. And when they're at the bottom, I don't mind if they're a little bit generous, but if you're going to lead with them, you're right. There's probably 25 skills listed here, and there's no way. Some of them are huge worlds, like, oh, AWS. Well, there's an unlimited amount of depth. You could know how to spell AWS and maybe what the letters stand for, or you could know a ton about them. Similarly, Unity game engine. You could like have built 5 games in Unity, or you could, have installed it on your desktop. So I think Boris makes a good call here, which is list the few things that are real or break it out, as he said in the other resume, with strong and familiar. But, between the languages and environments and software, uh, you've got 50 keywords here. And keyword spamming, whether for an engine or for me, is not going to get you very far. Particularly because, like, what the hell does it mean that again, Internet Explorer? Have you written code in it, or does it mean like I've opened it? So, uh, this is not a strong opening. There's also the question of what are you seeking? Because you've been independent, it's an objective thing. I will now admit this is a bias. I'm going to hit on a bias. Everybody and their brother. The only thing less interesting to me than your blockchain startup is your weed startup. And I love where you're using blockchain. This person isn't, but I honest to God see resumes where people are going to use blockchain to improve weed startups. And it's just, I hope you make a bazillion Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever you're after at your blockchain startup, selling weed, because it's going to be hard. You can say I'm a boomer, even though I'm not, but those seem like joke companies. Yeah, and Duke of Thought here says, yeah, and I did get the OK Boomer from the gentleman who wrote the resume, or lady, I'm not sure. I think it's Mr. Momentum. But anyway, if you've worked at a blockchain startup, you need some accomplishments, and you need to show how that advanced your skills, because while blockchain may be the next technology that rules the world, it may also be a forgotten thing like HTML5 that, like, yeah, nobody really cares. I think Boris made a great point here on your independent consulting. I'd try and strengthen that. Use the room you're going to gain by shrinking the professional skills. The game studio is solid. I want to know what the accomplishments are. Um, and flown to Cambridge is kind of cool to develop video game, a cross-platform multiplayer next generation sandbox game. Again, I'm looking for the results. Like, what did these things? None of you've done a good job. Again, Boris, I'm speaking as a hiring manager. Every bullet begins with an action verb: develop, developed, implemented, design, design, collaborated, presented, integrated. So it's the stuff you're doing. I don't know why it mattered. So I don't know what came out of any of those things, which would be good. Boris, your point about this being weird, the person has a scientific paper. Um, uh, I think this is where a link would make a difference. Like, in other words, I get you as a recruiter might not click through, but if it made it through you to me as a hiring manager, if I had that thought of, oh, that's weird, it being clickable would then clickable to me communicates it's real, you can see it, I'm not bullshitting you. And so if nothing else for authenticity, I feel like that's where you link things. Um and then yeah, I have one other interesting comment here. Well, I don't know, it's interesting to me. I like the little touch, since you didn't use color, of the icons, the gears, uh the graduation cap for education, the flask for scientific. It's just a little bit of character in a black and white resume. So I'll roll back to you, Boris. I'll put you on camera. We'll wrap up, but grade that resume. What would you? Do you need me to
I,
show it to you again, or you have it in your
yeah,
mind?
no, and I'll say similar to the bias you have against blockchain, which I don't share. I have a similar bias against independent, overly general independent contracting resumes.
Okay.
Um, but what I'll give this, I don't know. Let's say I'll give it a B. It's a solid B. Um,
Interesting. You're nicer. You haven't graded anything below a B though.
yeah,
Um,
I'm an opportunist, and what I would do though, I'll tell you is, I love hearing your descriptions of how you read a resume. Like this exercise, we're actually going through a resume calibration, which is something that is common for a recruiter
oh,
to
that's a
do
great
with a
point.
hiring manager. A
Yep.
recruiter and a hiring manager will sit down, and a recruiter will show them 30 resumes, and they'll just say, "Tell me what you think," and they'll listen to the way the hiring manager talks about a resume. And so part of the value that a recruiter would bring is, if I were talking to this candidate and I knew, Ethan, that you happen to really like results-based resumes, I'd say, "Hey, listen, I get what you're telling me about your resume. I get what you're telling me about your background. I think the hiring manager will like you. I don't think they're going to respond really well to the way your resume is written. Let me give you some tips. Tweak it a little bit so that it speaks to who it is that we're going to introduce you to." And whereas you're interested in resumes written in this format, and based on how I read your calibration, a different hiring manager may care zero about that and will care about XYZ attributes. And so in going through that exercise, the recruiter is equipped to then kind of counsel their candidates, and then also their hiring managers, to ultimately make the best hire possible, because the resume is really just, it's a data point, and it's a way to conform years and years of experience into like that single sheet of paper, which is really, it's really tricky.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've answered a bunch of questions. We've reviewed all the viewer resumes that were submitted, at least early on. If someone put one in late, sorry, I'll get to you another time, or maybe I won't. But what we have done that's awesome is we've had Boris here. I'll pop it up in chat. Boris runs Bink Search. He's got a list of jobs on your website, right? I did that completely wrong because my brain is on. But somewhere you can see all the companies he works with. And then I assume it's on your actual website also, what roles or not.
We're working on that. We're working
It's
on that
not
right now.
there yet.
Yeah, not there yet. What we did put up recently is um, a list of resources of companies in our community that are hiring, because there's so many people that are laid off and so many companies that are hiring, we created a resource page on our website where you could just link to all these companies that are hiring and all these people that are looking for new opportunities. Not necessarily that Bink is represented, just a community page.
Got it. And is that somewhere I could show off? Is it on your website where you can describe it to me?
If you just go right to the webpage, the little top headliner
Oh,
on
the
the web,
COVID. Okay, the
COVID
COVID.
resources page. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So there's a top headline. I'll put this on screen here for everybody in case you're looking, or you certainly know people who are. If you go to Bing Search, and then I'll paste the link in chat also, they are trying to help people. Yep, Hephaestus beat me to it, as always. Thank you to my wonderful moderation crew. Um, but this is all the companies they know of that are hiring, that are laying off, all kinds of stuff. Um, so, and this is unfortunately probably, we can all, this is an ad for an upcoming show on Friday at 3 o'clock. I will have another wonderful economist. We've tapped in through a friend at Twitch to a pool of professors of economics and finance who come on the show. And Friday's guest specializes in home. What's the best way to explain this? In the impact of COVID on household spending. So much more at the individual level, not the corporate level. And we're going to get a chance to talk with him about the impact of COVID on the economy because that's his research topic. There'll also be some level of personal finance. Regardless, the point is, unfortunately, I believe there's going to be a lot more impact on the economy, at least short to medium term, and I would say well into 2021 at some level. So, opinion. What are you actually? This would be good for you to talk about, Boris. This stay-at-home order is only a month old for most of the world. What are you seeing? There's obviously a lot of companies here hiring, some with layoffs. What are you seeing for the hiring economy? As kind of a parting thought.
Yeah, it's very much all over the place. There are some companies that are hiring like crazy. There are some companies and the companies that are hiring like crazy are the companies that build the services that we use every day. So think about all the services that you use on your phones, on your computer, in your day-to-day today. Those are the companies that are hiring right now.
Games also, by the way.
Yeah, very much games, anything streaming, anything delivery based, anything educational, anything healthcare. Those companies are hiring. The companies that you're not using day to day, those companies are not hiring. And then, for better or for worse, there is a massive herd right in the middle that's just kind of going with the status quo of deciding to pause right now because they don't know what's going to happen next. That's generally what's happening. On the individual side, uh, everyone's behavior is required to be changed. So a lot of work from home, a lot of figuring out how to create opportunity with new experiences that we're all in right now. So a great way that I've seen it described is this is like a massive reset. And when there's a massive reset, everyone is given in some form of an equal opportunity to figure out what that new future will look like. So whether you're in an advantage position of hiring or a disadvantaged position of looking for new opportunities, you are both equally trying to figure out what the future is going to hold in general. Because no one knows. And so you're able to use great platforms like LinkedIn or Twitch or whatever other mediums to show your ideas, share your ideas. If you're unemployed and you're a developer, build an app. You're a designer, go design something cool. If you're in marketing, go show how you might market something. Show the world how you might do something. It's incredible. People are paying attention to that because they're generally looking for direction, insight, perspective on what the future will hold, and it's an opportunity like no other to distinguish yourself as it relates to that. No matter how unempowered one might feel from a job search perspective, it's an incredibly unique opportunity that we will never get back once this thing does kind of settle back into whatever it settles back into.
All right. Well, with that, I will let you go. You've been incredibly generous with your time. Clap it up in chat, please, for Boris, who took over 2 hours tonight to share his expertise, to bring us some resumes, to critique some of ours here um, in from the community. And I'll just say, I will say, different placement firms have different reputations, but I've never seen anything but high quality ethical work from Boris and his team. I would work with them in a heartbeat. And so if you are looking for a job in our industry, in the tech industry, by all means, consider companies that he represents. And otherwise, I hope this has been incredibly helpful. And for all the future viewers on YouTube, Boris has been at it with Bing Search for over 18 years. So they're not going anywhere, even if you're seeing this video 1, 2, 3 years down the road. Boris will be there as constant as the Northern Star,
No
helping
pressure.
you.
No pressure. No pressure. But yeah, anyone listening, follow me on LinkedIn. Mention this stream. It's my first Twitch, so it will forever hold a special place in my heart. And I'm happy to put you in touch with whatever recruiter might be working on something. We're working on over 180 open jobs across all sorts of pretty incredible technology companies. And this is right now in what's supposedly a non-hiring economy.
Yeah.
So mention this stream, and I'll put you in touch with whatever recruiter is working on something relevant.
All right. Fantastic. Well, Boris, I'll let you go. I'll wind up the stream here, but thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Ethan. Pleasure to be
Yeah.
here.
Have a good night. Thank
Bye.
you so much.
Bye.
All right. And there's the big fat Zoom window that pops up, which we don't need. So look, everybody, we killed it. We did a great night. I'm over time, of course. I always promise people I will. I promise my mods I'll only be 90 minutes. His name is Boris Epstein, Outcast, and he's at Bing Search. So with that, I'm going to call it a night, but I will say before I go, let's see. I updated this. It doesn't get used in chat enough. Our next stream will be just 36 hours or something from now. Ugh, what the hell? This chatbot is pissing me off because that didn't update either, and I want to know why. Because that isn't true. Well, I'll fix it before my next edit. Look, what I just popped up is bullshit. Our next stream will be at, I'll type it in here, and it's definitely in Discord. It will be at 2:30 p.m. on Tuesday, and that's always Pacific Daylight Time. And I'm going to have a guest. We're going to do emotional resilience, which I keep wanting to spell with 2 L's, but is really only one. We're going to do emotional resilience. And what we're going to talk about when we do, oh, I know, I fixed that only in the timers. So it's right in the timers, but it's not right otherwise. Now it's fixed. So we're gonna do one of those streams where I stream internal to Amazon for a corporate audience, and you're all invited to hear the same thing. And so I'm bringing in a guest speaker from AWS who's super polished and passionate about speaking about emotional resilience. So this is the topic of grit. It's how to get through hard times. It's how to feel solid inside yourself and be confident when the shit's hitting the fan. And I think we all need that. And you can never have too much of it. Good times, bad times. The people with internal fortitude who can handle adversity are generally going to do well. And so this is an opportunity to hear a speaker who's incredibly passionate about that. And I'll be facilitating. We probably won't be using the Q&A tool for that, but well, actually we will. I'm wrong. Scratch that too. So we'll have that turned on. We'll take questions at the end. So with that, it was really nice talking to all of you tonight. Thank you for coming out. Happy Easter. Don't care what your religion is, what your view is. Rather, I care that you stuff yourself silly with jelly beans and celebrate and have a few chocolate eggs to top them off. That's exactly where I'm going right now. And we do have new emotes coming, by the way. We have emotes under design by 2 different audiences or 2 different artists. And so we're going to have a bunch of new emotes coming in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we'll have more fun stuff here in channel. And I've written the first chapter of what will one day be my book. So maybe we'll do a stream about that sometime too, because you guys can get first copies, maybe even signed first copies, because that's what you want. Just don't hold your breath. That'll take a little while to get the book all cranked out, but I have started writing it, and I need, So with that, there's a ton going on. Be strong, be fun. One of the new emotes we'll have is for my traditional sign-off where I say cheers. We'll have a cheers emote. So with that in mind, cheers. Good night. Thank you all so much, and hope to see you Tuesday.